Hello, my name is Daniel Marchese. Today I would like to discuss the short story On the Rainy River by Tim O'Brien. The short story is featured in his book of short stories called The Things They Carried. The Things They Carried was published in 1990. The Things They Carried is highly regarded as a prominent piece of Vietnam War literature. Over the years, The Things They Carried has sold over 2 million copies. If you recall, we have already read a short story by Tim O'Brien called How to Tell a True War Story. This story is also featured in the book The Things They Carried, along with the story I will be discussing today, On the Rainy River. Today I would like to discuss two main aspects regarding the story. The first aspect is an overview of the story. The second aspect is why I think the story would be a useful addition to our course, Literature in a Global Context. Let me start by sharing a brief overview of the story On the Rainy River. The story starts by Tim telling us that this story has never been shared before. He tells us the story is so personal to him that he has never even told it to his mother or his wife. He's telling it for the first time to us, the readers. The reason why he has never told the story before is because he believes it makes him seem like a coward. His belief of him looking like a coward is a common theme throughout the story, which we will discuss later on in this discussion. So the story begins, the untold story, the story being told for the first time. It begins as Tim just graduates college. He graduates top of his class and has a bright future ahead of him. He plans to take graduate courses in Harvard in the upcoming fall. Everything in his life is looking good. And then he gets a letter that changes his life forever. This letter that he gets informs him that he has been drafted to the Vietnam War. The moment he gets this letter, he does not want to go to the war. He does not want to go fight in Vietnam. There are two main reasons he talks about why he does not want to go to the war. The first reason is an ego reason. He believes he's better than the war. He's better than the people. He believes he's better than the people that are fighting in the war. He thinks the war is below him. He's above the war. The second reason is he does not think the United States should be involved in this war. He doesn't think the United States have a justifiable reason for becoming involved in the Vietnam War and taking the lives of American soldiers. As the summer proceeds, and he realizes that he's getting closer and closer to having to go to the war, he becomes more and more stressed. He's deeply worried about going to the war. It's weighing on his mind heavily. He realizes he has two options regarding the war. He can, one, go to the war and be seen as a hero in his town, or the second option is he can flee the country. He can flee to Canada, yet he thinks he will be seen as a coward if he decides to flee to Canada. After much thought and consideration, he makes a decision. He's not going to go to the war. He writes his parents a farewell letter and drives to Canada. He drives to a river called Rainy River. It separates Minnesota and Canada. When he arrives at the Rainy River, he stays at the nearby lounge, which is on the river, while he thinks and begins to take his journey to leaving the United States and avoiding the war. The lounge he stays at is called the Tip Top Lounge. After he stays there a few nights, he eventually begins to work at the Tip Top Lounge. He works there so he does not have to pay for his stay. He helps the owner, which is an elder woman, with anything she needs help with. One of his roles is to fish. He fishes on the river that connects Canada and the United States, called Rainy River. Every time he goes out, he realizes how close Canada is. He realizes how close freedom is for him if he would just jump out of the boat and swim. One day while he is fishing, he realizes this is his last shot, his last chance to either jump out of the boat and swim to Canada, a short distance, and be freed of all the worry that's going on in his mind, free of the war. He realizes that this is his time, this is his chance, it's do or die for him, it's make it or break it. If he jumps, he'll be a coward. If he stays on the boat and goes to war, he'll be a hero. After much consideration, he stays on the boat. He goes back home, and then he goes off to war in Vietnam. That concludes my overview of the story On the Rainy River. I would now like to discuss why I think this work will be a good addition to our course's work. The first reason why I think this work would be a good addition, it is a relatable topic. As college students, we can understand what Tim is going through as he just graduated college and got this life-changing letter. I think I would have very similar reactions as Tim, of fear and being scared to go to the war. This is a very relatable story, and I think it would be relatable for all college students while we read it. The second reason I think this work would be a good addition to our coursework is because it is very beautifully written. Tim O'Brien uses great imagery and wording in all of his stories in the book, The Things They Carried. I especially like the imagery and the wording in this story On the Rainy River. One of my favorite examples of his imagery is while Tim is on the boat on the Rainy River fishing. While he is on the boat on Rainy River, he is in the water that connects the United States to Canada. He is so close to Canada that he can see it in detail. He's so close that all he has to do is jump out of the boat and swim a short distance to reach land in Canada. One of the lines reads, "I could see tiny berries on the bushes. I could see a squirrel up in the birch trees." This line was so powerful for me because I believe it symbolizes how close Tim was. It was so easy for him to jump and go to Canada. It was so easy, it was so close that he could see it in detail. He could see his future, he could see freedom so close and yet so far. These items represent freedom for Tim. The red berries and the squirrel, they both represent freedom for Tim. Freedom that he desires, yet freedom that he will never capture. I think this book would be a great addition to the Unit 4 work we did, War. We already did a Tim O'Brien story, yet I think adding this story would be a great addition. The story brings a great theme with it. I think that theme is the duality between being a coward and a hero. Tim thinks about this extremely. This is a common theme throughout the story. Tim has to decide whether he is going to be a hero and go to the war, or a coward and avoid the war. Tim feels if he does not go to the war, he'll be viewed as a coward and a coward that let down his country. Yet if he goes to the war, which he does not want to go by any means, he will be seen more as a hero. This conflict of being a hero and a coward is a common theme throughout the story and a really interesting theme to think about. So I think this story, on a Rainy River would be a great addition to our coursework. It is an easy read, it's an enjoyable read, and it adds a great depth to the Unit 4 work on war. It adds a depth to the unit that I don't think we really captured this semester. This story adds an interesting aspect to the idea of war and reading about war. The story gives us an internal look at what a soldier goes through before he or she accepts or does not accept his draft. Tim goes through this extreme internal struggle, and I'm sure all the people that were drafted for the Vietnam War and wars before it went through this eternal struggle as well. I think this internal struggle is something very interesting to think about and look. I think it would be a great addition to our work with war in Unit 4. That concludes my presentation. I thank you for listening.